Hello everybody, welcome to today's show. My name is Spencer Walsh. Thank you so much for joining us here today. We really do appreciate it. It is great to be back after a bit of a miss show on Thursday. We're going to add this one for you here on Saturday. We got a good one for you on the docket. We're talking about CNN firing just in right now Chris Cuomo. As we start the show, a little Saturday night surprise for Chris Cuomo. He is no longer on CNN anymore. Surprising a lot of people. I'll tell you why I wasn't that surprised and where we go from here. Also, an update on Roe v. Wade in the Supreme Court. Things not looking good over there at the moment. Also, human rights defenders are warning about a possible Biden border policy turning into Trump 2.0, causing massive problems, massive damages to people's human rights. So that is a big problem we're going to be going over. Also, some good news out of Honduras. The U.S. Progressive Caucus has held the Honduran election as a chance for the new chapter in Honduran relations. And I think it could be very interesting. I'll tell you why. We're getting into all of that stuff today. Really do appreciate you joining us here today on Newsflash. Alright, so let's get right into it, and we are starting, of course, with Chris Cuomo here. So let's get into this. This is Michael Gernbaum and John Coblin in the New York Times. So what this pretty much the overarching situation is here is Chris Cuomo kind of used his journalistic sources or whatever to kind of help his brother Andrew with his sexual abuse problems, trying to get more info on accusers, using his sources in journalism to talk about, to find out from other journalists what they knew about his brother, when they're going to publish, what they're going to publish, et cetera, et cetera. And that was very problematic. It's hard to, when that is known, it's hard to put him on, and still call yourself a news network, which I think it was pretty clear from jump that they're going to be interest in CNN. That's, they still at least wanted to do that because, if they do that, at that point, they're no better than Fox, and half of their output is devoted to, the fact that they are better than Fox, and they're, a big part of their output, pretty much all their output is devoted to the fact they're better than Fox. They're that big, proud, strong news agency that is so successful, and that is like that's probably going to be one of the biggest things right there. So it would have been very hard, I think, for them to have Chris Cuomo, at least while this outrage is so hot. The documents were just released like last week. It is hard to imagine them kind of coming back and just getting to continue as usual if none of this stuff had ever, if they had just, put him right back on to the TV. So right back on the TV. So he was fired Saturday amid a network inquiry into his efforts to help his brother Andrew Cuomo, the then governor of New York, to fight off a sexual harassment scandal. Chris Cuomo was suspended earlier this week pending further evaluation of new information that came to light about his involvement with his brother's defense. We retained a respected law firm to conduct the review, and we have terminated him effective immediately. While in the process of that review, additional information has come to light. Despite the termination, we will investigate as appropriate. So apparently that was not all. The stuff that was we publicly know now, it seems, was not all. That is that is going to be a very interesting. It's going to be a very interesting situation. For sure. So the announcement completed a pretty stunning downfall for Chris Cuomo, the top-rated anchor at CNN, and a veteran television journalist who built a pretty successful broadcast career outside, quote-unquote, of his, he did not, that's ridiculous framing there, outside of his famed political family. Until this last month, Chris Cuomo had enjoyed the support of CNN's president, Jeff Zucker, and faced no discipline for his behind-the-scenes strategizing with Andrew Cuomo's political aides, a breach of basic journalistic norms. So that is, something you just cannot possibly even do and still be called or considered, at least a respected journalist in this country. There's still some facades that need to be upheld, or at least, do it publicly. If you get caught doing it, that's one thing. That just cannot be tolerated. The facade has to go on. A new batch of testimony and text messages released by the New York Attorney General on November 29th revealed the CNN anchor had played a more intimate and engaged role than immediately known in his brother's political affairs than the network had said it had previously known as well, so that they definitely didn't like. CNN executives are previously steadfast in backing Cuomo, placed him on an indefinite suspension on Tuesday, a sign of deep unease among the network's management. The spectacle of the high-profile cable news anchor advising his powerful politician amid a scandal was a long-standing headache for many CNN journalists. They're really torn up about it because, a lot of the big shark with Jeff Zucker and CNN enjoying those big ratings during the Trump years was built off of pretty much one thing, and that was, pump the stars, pump the, Don Lemon, Chris Cuomo crosstalk situations that, really drove up the ratings. I mean, their ratings cratered after 2020 because there was just no stakes there, and that is just so much of what they built their big brand off of. January 20th, 2021, when Biden gets in there, it just is going to, Chris Cuomo's ratings go down. He's still, deeply, he's more in competition with Greg Kelly of Newsmax than Tucker Carlson or Rachel Maddow at this point at 9 p.m. But he is definitely, the kind of biggest host. So that, and that personality-driven thing, definitely something they're going to want to try and move away from in the future. So Zucker, for a time at least, has stood behind Cuomo, saying the anchor was human and facing very unique circumstances. The network has also offered the anchor a formal leave if he wished to work more closely with his brother's team. They were very, very supportive, very complimentary of him and, kind of backing him throughout a lot of this. But it just seems like this line, they just were not interested in standing by and kind of watching happen here, which is very understandable because it is a very just completely breaking and just taking a crap all over any kind of semblance of any previous understanding of journalistic ethics. All right. With that being said, it's time to now move on to our next story. Big attack on Roe v. Wade in the Supreme Court. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, we have so many fun things to report here at the Spencer Walsh Radio Network that you're going to want to tune into. First and foremost, we have Newsflash, our flagship show, which will be on every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, wherever you get your podcasts, of course. And now, for the first time ever, we have the Spencer Walsh Show in a rare collaboration and syndication with WMFO 91.5 in Somerville and Medford. It'll be on the air there first and live, 1 to 2 p.m. every single Monday. And from there, we'll put it on SD Run podcast feed within 24 hours. That's the lineup. Just keep listening to the Spencer Walsh Radio Network, wherever you get your podcasts. Hello, everybody. Let's get into our next story here today. We're talking about this Mississippi abortion law. I don't want to take a moment to give you kind of the this argument here in the Roe v. Wade situation. Roe v. Wade pretty much in its kind of really in an incredibly bad position, probably the worst position it's ever been in, with the Texas law and then the Mississippi law coming in as well. Is here in the New York Times. So Donald J. Trump, who helped to appoint 3 Supreme Court justices while president, vowed that they would help overturn Roe v. Wade. And, this is very true, and it is something that so many people in liberal media, and especially in this kind of liberal judicial kind of pundit class, I guess you could see, that have kind of been all over the media being like, oh, you don't need to worry about like people like Amy Coney Barrett, people like Brett Kavanaugh, like they understand precedent. All the people who assured us that people, again, like Brett Kavanaugh, people like Susan Collins comes to mind on this, like people like Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett would end up preserving and protecting the Roe v. Wade precedent. Like these people are all starting to look very bad, and they always did look bad because it is obvious that after the culmination, or really what is the culmination of ever since 1973, the day after, that project has begun and taken place now for almost 50 years to try and overturn this bill, or to try and overturn this law, or ruling, or precedent, or whatever. Attack abortion rights, set our country back, not just in the the rights that it offers its citizens, in kind of the economic front, but also in this really just kind of draconian fashion. Just taking us back to years and years past. In arguments on Wednesday, there were more than a few signs that Donald Trump had succeeded in appointing these judges. And by the way, if anybody tells you that Amy Coney Barrett or Brett Kavanaugh, there's any chance that they're going to keep Roe v. Wade, they're just not serious people. They just simply are not serious people whatsoever. Because, they are, they're anyone who is, they have to be incredibly stupid, and, it's a really amazing how they got the job if they can't realize that the clear and potent existence of this judicial project, which is a political project, and just a project that has dominated conservatism, Christian conservatism, for, again, as I said, the past 50 years. It is there. It is driving this. It has been pretty much the marquee issue. There are some other ones, but you cannot get a right-wing court appointment without, confirming their support for Roe v. Wade. So the three Democratic appointed justices, sounding anguished and angry, said that overruling Roe soon after a bare-knuckled political campaign to change the court's membership would represent a tipping point, one from which the court's legitimacy could not recover. Again, this is something that, this is a fiction that liberals only hold onto, because when you look at the court, and especially the way conservatives have treated the court over the past 50 years, they have treated it very smartly and very astutely, and especially the entire judiciary in this, having not said the word before, Federalist Society, they have been incredibly influential. They have shaped the judiciary from the bottom up, and now are pretty much getting just this close to getting their goal after 50 years. They may say some kind of bromines about it when asked in public, but if you ask any kind of smart, savvy, right-wing politician or operative what they think about the Supreme Court, they don't think, it's some high and mighty, august institution that must be preserved and defended. It's an incredibly powerful body of unelected people who can appoint, if you have power, that will determine and shape country policy in an incredibly influential way. Again, as unelected representatives, of the Constitution, whatever that means, and they will shape this country's policy for, again, generations to come. That is huge, and it's something that nobody would consider. Nobody. Sonia Sotomayor saying, will this or at least on the left side, will this institution survive the stench that this creates in the public perception that the Constitution and its reading are just political acts, said Sonia Sotomayor. But again, anybody with half a brain looking at the situation, that includes someone like Sonia Sotomayor in this court, would realize that this is what it has been forever. Incredibly political, incredibly consequential decisions have been coming through the court for, time in memoriam, and all throughout that time it has been tied to political decisions, political appointments, and when things really matter, for the most part, there is a clear political explanation behind the way all the justices voted, because again, the Supreme Court is a political institution. Nobody on kind of liberal circles don't understand it. People on the right do. They have spent the past 50 years using this to their complete advantage, and that's just to reshape for at least for Roe. But I mean, they've been using the judiciary to their advantage for a lot longer than that. If the Supreme Court is perceived to be made up of politicians rather than judges, Justice Stephen G. Breyer said, "That's what kills us as an American institution." I really don't think, again, if you had to sum up most Americans' opinions on the Supreme Court, I mean, they probably don't know who these people are. But it's hard pressed. It's hard pressed to give yourself this kind of legitimate picture of Americans taking the Supreme Court as some sort of really great, august institution that must, is, if feelings are at all there, if there's knowledge there in any kind of meaningful way about the Supreme Court at this kind of point in time, yeah, they're probably just like, oh yeah, those are other people who are kind of powerful, unelected, and people who, just don't really have a big reflection or kind of contact with the people, to say the least. So the case eliminates competing and shifting conceptions of the role of the court. For decades, conservatives have argued that Roe amounted to judicial activism, announcing a right not found in the Constitution and overriding the political process to achieve an outcome that politicians would not. Now, after nearly half a century in which that right has been woven into the societal fabric, the argument may have come full circle, with many liberals saying a decision by the court to eliminate the right to abortion would amount to flagrant political activism. And again, this is the stuff that I love, and this is the way that we process politics here in America, and we do it largely through the mainstream media, like stuff like some of the rulings that the court has done on the environment, stuff like the FEC versus Citizens United, stuff they've done on behalf of corporations, health insurance companies, banks, whatever. That stuff, that is not political act. Like, that stuff is not going to be in the headlines. That's not going to be political. That's not going to be hotly debated on CNN. Like, people are not going to turn out to vote over that. But that is really what has super, super deep, long-lasting, compelling influences on people's lives. And that is what is really going to make a change, I think, for many, many years to come. Because, yeah, I mean, these are questions about, the how much power the people that kind of shape our world today have, and they're, again, decided by just a group of, lawyers who have very strong opinions and got to be good friends with presidents. Like, that's what they all are, or, would be kind of politically advantageous. I guess they're not all friends with the president. They get in tight with the presidents, I guess, would be one way of putting it. Yeah, so questions about the court's legitimacy are more pitched than they've ever been, said Melissa Murray, a law professor at the New York University. Should the court overrule Roe, she added, it would represent a turning point, signaling the court has been weaponized for political purposes. So, yeah, I think that would make it harder for a lot of the media to ignore, because, again, it's an issue, but, again, the court has been political. It's been making incredibly kind of political decisions for, pretty much its entire existence, because the court is part of the government. Like, these are people who are considering these ideas through their kind of own internal framework, through other interests, by the way, than just the Constitution, and doing what's right all the time, 100%. And telling yourself otherwise at this point is pretty much child's play. And oh, and look what we have here. So 61% according to Quinnipiac University poll of Americans said the Supreme Court was mainly motivated by politics, while 32% said it was mainly motivated by the law. 3 years ago, the number was at 50. So 3 years ago was what? 2018, 2017. Gallup poll in September found that only 40% of Americans approved the job the court was doing, the lowest since 2000. Makes sense then. When Gallup first posed the question, a Marquette Law School poll found a 12-point drop in public approval of the Supreme Court from 66 to 54% in little more than a year. Charles Franklin, a law professor, a political scientist at Marquette who oversaw the poll, said the plummeting numbers were a threat to the court's authority. And again, there's already been talk of kind of challenging. I'm definitely for kind of like limiting the power or kind of democratizing the power of the Supreme Court in some way. I think that is incredibly fair. Because it just needs to happen. There is just too much power in too few unaccountable hands, I think. But this is just to be clear, it is a very, very serious kind of situation. So, and if you want to look at precedent, you can look at, I guess, Brown versus Board of Education, for instance, as an example, when the compliance is not automatic. Some states here, again, for years, refusing to follow the Brown decision, which bans segregation in public schools, engaging in massive public resistance. Billboards calling for the impeachment of Chief Justice Earl Warren, who wrote the court's unanimous decision, were commonplace. The Brown's decision is almost universally viewed as a towering achievement, but its enforcement required Dwight D. Eisenhower to send members of the 101st Airborne Division to Little Rock, Arkansas, to escort black students, such as Ruby Bridges in that famous picture, through an angry white mob. Not all presidents gave the court's rulings the same respect. Famously, 1832, President Andrew Jackson refused to enforce a Supreme Court decision arising from Georgia and the Cherokee Nation over kind of land rights and treaty rights. It probably apocryphal, but nonetheless potent comment is often attributed to Jackson about Chief Justice John Marshall, and here it goes. John Marshall has made his decision. Now let him enforce it. And I think if people start thinking like Andrew at some point, especially hopefully on the Democratic side, things could get very, very interesting, very, very fast.
Buckingham Palace has announced the death of His Royal Highness the Duke of Edinburgh.
It's Newsflash.
You're listening to Newsflash here on the Spencer Walsh Radio Network. Thank you so much for doing so. My name's Spencer Walsh, and we are getting into it. All right, so we're talking a little bit today about some immigration, human rights defenders here, and this is, again, Common Dream, John Quealy writing. Human rights defenders are warning Biden the border policy is quickly transforming into Trump 2.0. The question is, does he want to do something about it, or was that kind of exactly the point? Human rights champions decried a Friday announcement by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention that it was extending what critical experts call the wholly misguided Title 42 border program that allows officials to exploit public health fears as a way to block lawful and protect the efforts by asylum seekers to seek refuge in the United States. Since the rule was first implemented in 2020 by former President Donald Trump, of course, then it was widely condemned as racist and xenophobic. Rights advocates who have repeatedly cited public health experts who note the U.S. government has more than adequate resources and tools, even during the current pandemic, to safely process people seeking protection under the nation's asylum laws. It's very, very possible. It's very, very probable. And, I think, if I'm not mistaken, a judge has weighed in on this and called it incredibly inhumane. So I do want to kind of track that down, but. And this was, again, the same practice that Donald Trump was using, which was the kind of stopping at the border and saying, we're starting right after COVID, and saying, we cannot process any asylum seekers, guys, because of COVID. That is what is, sorry, if you're coming from Guatemala, if you're coming from Honduras, which, by the way, we'll get into this in a second, they just got out from under an American coup after like 10 years. And what's happening now is, these people are just being, again, turned away from legitimate kind of processing, legitimate asylum claims for pretty much the kind of BS reason of COVID. This is September 16th. This is a judge who ordered the Biden administration to stop using Title 42 stop expelling migrant families using a Trump-era Title 42 policy, which, by the way, if you're a Democrat like Joe Biden and you ran on this whole situation of, I'm going to be better than Trump, I'm going to be like, restore the soul of the nation, all that stuff, which, by the way, your whole point of that was, a big point of that was, we're going to get the kids out of the cages, that kind of thing. That was like a big moral downside of the Trump presidency that you wanted to kind of capitalize on, and just being better in general on immigration. If one judge tells you to stop using the Biden the Trump era policy, the Title 42, that should probably be enough. Should probably be enough. So we're focused. Psaki said at the time, Jen Psaki of the White House, we're focused on taking steps to address the root causes of migration, implement orderly asylum processes, strengthen collaborative migration management efforts in the region, and effectively secure our borders. And we made considerable progress on that front. CDC expanded it, and then Title 42, and it was kind of hit by this judge. And then September 30th, a federal appeals court has weighed in. A judge, so yeah, this is a federal appeals court had preserved the administration's ability to use the Title 42 to expel migrant families. Like we saw, again, with the whipping situation in Haiti, that was another great example of the situation. These kind of migrants who have been really, really aggressively kind of handed out by Biden's Border Patrol. Federal court, again, they moved to preserve that on the 30th of September. Unfortunately, missed that story on the show at the time. So the action by the U.S. Court of Appeals comes after for the D.C. Circuit comes after the federal judge issued a time-delayed order to block the administration's use of the Title 42 policy for moving migrant families earlier this month. The judge's order was scheduled to go into effect on Thursday, the Thursday of that week, but then obviously didn't. So now we have pretty much nothing really left but to kind of have these very kind of flimsy statements, I guess is what you could say. Public health advocates, including, again, former officials from the CDC, have long contended that Title 42 has no public health rationale, said Amy Fisher, the America's Advocacy Director of Amnesty International USA, in a statement on Friday evening. Instead, it serves as a politically motivated tool using racist, xenophobic tropes about immigrants to weaponize COVID-19 against migrants and asylum seekers. And of course, yeah, we have a lot of similar statements from other human rights groups, and pretty much like the amazing point, like the really kind of underlining kind of thing worth highlighting for me is this real fake gap almost between someone like Biden and someone like Trump on these issues, because time after time, in a big way, these policies that are going to end up being pursued is, it's going to be the most, it's going to be startlingly similar. Not maybe not the most similar. There's going to be some disparities possibly, but in the end, it's going to be very, very similar. All right. Now, let's take a look at some good news. This is in Common Dreams again. Brett Wilkins writing, calling the victory of the Honduran President-elect Xiomara Castro, an opportunity for the new chapter in U.S.-Honduras relations. Congressional Progressive Caucus Chair Pramila Jayapal on Friday congratulated the first woman and socialist to be elected leader of the Central American nation, long plagued by American subversion of democracy. Castro, political activist and wife of former Honduran President Manuel Zelaya, won last week's presidential election by more than 15 points over the right-wing Tegucigalpa mayor, Nasri Asfura. So Jayapal said in a statement that she hopes the new phase of bilateral relations is one based on mutual respect, support for democracy, and equitable development. And again, this is a great example of kind of how recent U.S. crimes in that region are. I mean, if you look at just Bolivia in 2019, just 10 years before that, in 2009, we had Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, kind of the crown jewel of the Obama administration. I guess it wouldn't really be the crown jewel of the Obama administration, but of Hillary's kind of first big thing, I guess, in 2009, what she got in there was with her good friend and top political aide, Lanny Davis, was to go after Manuel Zelaya and pretty much initiate a coup to get him out of there, which is pretty significant. So Zelaya, he challenges Honduras' status as a U.S. client state while spurning neoliberal economic policies of his oligarch predecessors. In just 3 years in office, he implemented policies including an 80% minimum wage hike, universal free education, free school lunches for 1.6 million children, free electricity for low-income households, and land reforms including government subsidies for poor farmers. Pretty significant stuff. Zelaya's progressive reforms earned him powerful enemies among the Honduras oligarchy, in which a handful of families control 90% of the nation's wealth, and in U.S. business and political circles. In 2009, he was ousted by a military coup led by the General Romeo Orlando Vasquez Velasquez, a two-time graduate of the U.S. Army School of the Americas. He loved it so much he came back for a second round, also known as the School of the Assassins, due to its plenitude of dictators and human rights criminals among its alumni. So, yeah, it's pretty much a place where war criminals learn their their tricks, I guess. So this is a little bit of a video here. Let's take a look from AJ Plus. I don't know how much narration. It's just going to be music. So they just elected their first democratic socialist women president, saying today the people have brought justice. We have reversed authoritarianism and we have reversed the status quo. And she says, out with the death squads, out with the corruption, out with the drug trafficking and organized crime, out with the administration, no more poverty and no more misery in Honduras. Castro will be the first left-wing president of Honduras in 12 years. The last member of her party to be president was her husband, again, who was removed from power in a military coup. She says this is a Castro supporter. She said she fought and then triumphed in the end, thank God. We all hope that she does what she promised for jobs, health, and education. The husband did a pretty good job, at least in the 3 years it seems that he was there. So immediately following Zelaya's unconstitutional ouster, members of the CPC mobilized to denounce the overthrow as a military coup and call for a reinstatement of the elected president. Sajai this is talking about, I guess, at the time. However, despite initially condemning the coup and despite a demand by the UN General Assembly for the immediate and unconditional restoration of Zelaya's rule, the administration of then U.S. President Barack Obama recognized the illegitimate presidency of Porfirio Lobo, the Honduran oligarch's handpicked candidate, an election marred by government violence and widely viewed as fraudulent. So they pretty much said, we don't like this, guys. We want to see some change. And then they had the election that was completely screwed up, and they're like, great, all good. As Hondurans took the streets to protest against the coup regime, state security and paramilitary forces responded by killing hundreds of actual and perceived opponents, while then U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton worked behind the scenes to ensure Zelaya did not return to power. So there you go. That's where Hill Dog comes in. Before she was assassinated in March 2016, indigenous land defender Berta Cáceres blamed Clinton for helping to legitimize the coup regime. Here, where she says, and this is Mehdi Hassan.
We all know how keen, hawkish Hillary Clinton is on regime change in the Middle East, in Iraq, Libya, Syria. What often gets forgotten, however, is what she did in Honduras. The fact that Honduras was a democracy didn't stop then Secretary of State Clinton backing regime change even there. Back in 2009, she threw her support behind the coup that ousted democratically elected Honduran President Manuel Zelaya, who was flown out of the country in his pajamas. While the UN, the EU, and the OAS were calling for Zelaya to be immediately reinstated, Clinton was, in her own words, to quote her 2014 memoir Hard Choices, strategizing a plan to restore order in Honduras and ensure that free and fair elections could be held quickly and legitimately, which would render the question of Zelaya moot. A pretty damning admission. Which is probably why she removed it from the paperback edition of her memoir that came out a year later. To make things worse, to this day, Clinton insists, against all evidence, that Honduran institutions followed the law in removing President Zelaya and refuses to call a coup a coup.
Our assessment was we should slow walk and try to stop anything that the government could take advantage of without calling it a coup.
That wasn't the assessment of our own US ambassador on the ground in Honduras at the time, who wrote in an official memo, there is no doubt that the military, Supreme Court, and National Congress conspired on June 28th in what constituted an illegal and unconstitutional coup. That memo of his includes the word coup a mere 12 times. Maybe Clinton just lost it in all her other emails. But here's the worst part. Earlier this year, Clinton actually congratulated herself on how events in Honduras turned out.
We managed a very difficult situation without bloodshed.
Put aside for a moment that the people of Honduras might not want the US managing situations in their country, to say with a straight face that the whole thing happened without bloodshed is astonishing, given the UN says the murder rate in Honduras went up by almost 50% after the coup, with the return of death squads, ongoing violence, and soldiers accused of murder and torture. Berta Cáceres, the famous Honduran human rights activist who singled out Hillary Clinton for backing the Honduran coup, warned in 2013 that the army has an assassination list of 18 wanted human rights fighters with my name at the top. When they want to kill me, they will do it. In March of this year, Cáceres was shot dead inside her own home. I guess it isn't surprising, is it, that Henry Kissinger and Hillary Clinton are such good friends.
So that's Mehdi Hasan pretty much excoriating this really just disgusting. You know, we say it so often, like the crimes in the United States, and you know how quickly, and you know, like just kind of sleep under the radar, don't even notice, but it's just there. It's just there, and it is just so devastating. And thank goodness. You know, one of the things about being and you know at college, you know, meeting new people, and I actually there's someone who lives probably, you know, feet away from me where I am right now, talking to you today, who is Honduran, you know, followed this whole election, was really into it, and I kind of heard about the situation from his perspective first, and yeah, it has been really cool to kind of, yeah, you know, shout out obviously to David. So yeah, David, kind of get me informed on Honduras. I should definitely, you know, David may be a future guest on this show, so keep an eye out for that, talking a little bit about Honduras. That would be definitely fun. But anyway, that being said, we will be back on Tuesday.